let's talk about regime change from a big picture perspective, right? So here are some questions that I want to ask you about what all these different people are saying and talking about. So my first question is, it is people say he was illegitimate, that his getting into power was illegitimate. He was an illegitimate ruler. So is this a reason for overthrowing another government? Is that a good justification for overthrowing a government, either by its own people or by another country?
Well, first of all, there's Romans 13. I don't see how you get overthrowing a government is compatible with Romans 13. That's a discussion we could have. The other discussion here is on the electoral legitimacy. I would say, I hear different things, different parties. Obviously, the people who support Maduro say his election was legitimate. So who are we going to believe and why? What's the facts? The same people who say that Maduro's election was not legitimate, that is to say, the people who oppose, let me make this clear, get the parties straight here. Usually, the parties who defend Maduro's election are also the people who defend Joe Biden's election. Is that right? Is that fair to say?
Sure.
People on the left. Okay, so I don't think anybody would say that Donald Trump had the right to capture Joe Biden. I mean, that's what the whole um, scenario that's being promoted with regard to January 6th was that Trump and his people were trying to do to Nancy Pelosi and Vice President Pence the same thing that Trump did to Maduro: break into the White House, break into the Capitol structure, and capture the guy and then take over the government. I mean, Venezuela is January 6th. All the bad rumors you hear about January 6th, I don't believe that's what they were trying to do on January 6th. But that's the scenario that's painted by the people who say Maduro's election was legitimate and Biden's election was legitimate. They're trying to say that Trump did to Maduro what Trump wanted to do to Nancy Pelosi and Biden.
Right. Yeah, that's an interesting point. And so that would be, I don't, that would have caused a lot of turmoil, I think, upheaval in our country if that would have taken place.
Oh, it would have been half the country against the other half. I mean, half of the politically active country against the other half of the politically active part of the country, because most people don't care. I don't think
Right.
most people would care one way or the other who was in charge. It doesn't matter.
Well, that brings me to another question now, because you do see a lot of people celebrating in the streets. And that's what they're showing. They're saying, well, look, there's all these people celebrating in the streets, so it must be a good thing.
Well,
But
I don't believe that. I mean, it might be true, but I don't believe it until I see some real facts. Because if you might recall, we were seeing scenes of people in the street when Saddam Hussein was overthrown. And you saw the big statue of Saddam Hussein being pulled down. And there was that whole picture, the whole scenario, again, the scenario of the popular support for the overthrow of Hussein. But then we found out that it was the military, a small band of military soldiers who were taking down the soldier of Saddam, and there was hardly anybody there. So it's media constructed popular support for the overthrow of Hussein. And now we're seeing what may be, I don't know. I don't know the facts. I don't keep up with this stuff very well, but we may be seeing another media controlled or propagated picture of popular support for the overthrow of Maduro.
that could be right. That could be what's going on. We don't exactly know.
I don't know.
And even the thing is even if there are some factions of people celebrating in the street, I mean, just like on January 6th, if that had, if Trump had overturned, let's say, the election and some people were excited about it, it still would have created a real civil faction, a civil war, so to speak, in our country. I mean, there's going to be people on all different sides of in Venezuela, I'm sure too. I mean, wouldn't it just create some huge civil war type problems in their country?
Well, it will certainly create division, and it will certainly, the lesson we're learning here, or it seems like the lesson we're being taught, is that violence is the way to solve political problems. Send the Marines. That's what that Trump's solution is: send the Marines. That's how to solve the problem. The real
Yeah.
problem, of course, is that there are a lot of people in Venezuela who voted for socialism, and they're idiots for doing that. And the problem with idiocy is not, I mean, the answer to idiocy is not armed military intervention, it's education and propaganda in the good sense,
Yeah.
which, the United States hasn't been doing that very well. And you could argue, what business is it of the United States government to try to change the people? I mean, the government of the United States has been doing this all over the world, creating civil disputes between two basically ignorant factions, but get them all militarily and violently aroused so that they try to do what the United States wants them to do. We've seen the CIA overthrow all kinds of countries, set up civil wars, create civil wars, generate them, incite wars and conflicts to try to overthrow a government the United States doesn't like, which is to say, overthrow a government which corporations don't like, and they're using the United States government to impose the corporation's will on these governments down there.
And that might be
I
the
mean,
case because there's talk of, these oil companies and a lot of the, oil reserves and the oil companies. I mean, oil is a huge topic when it comes to Venezuela because they have more reserves than Saudi Arabia. So it's like, that's one of the things apparently that's really on the table with this whole thing is now they can get their private equity contractors and huge companies to get down there and get the oil, and secure the oil for whoever.
well, it's also about a kind of restitution to oil companies. It's the corporations that are the important point here. It's not the oil itself, it's the profits to be derived from the oil and who gets the profits. And it is a fact, it is an unfortunate fact about socialism that the Venezuelan government pretty much nationalized a lot of oil companies. Exxon, all those big companies. They had their factories and all the money that they put in there, they had arrangements with the previous Venezuelan government to extract the oil and sell it. And there was a profit sharing plan and whatever. I don't know all the details.
Mm.
But when the socialist government came in, they basically stole all the oil equipment, the factories, the capital of these corporations for the benefit of the government. And so obviously the oil companies don't like that. They had their stuff taken from them. So
Yeah,
now they want the government of the United States to change government so that they get their capital back, their factories, their refineries, their pumps, and everything else. Which
right,
there's a legitimate issue there. Who
right.
who owns the property? Who owns the factories? Who owns the means of production? To put it in classical Marxist kind of terminology.
Yeah, that's terrible and unfortunate. And, I guess I think that's one of the risks of putting your assets at risk in any country. There's always a risk,
Yeah, well,
especially
that's the problem. Unstable governments, that is,
right,
unpredictable governments, um, interfere with investment. You can't create jobs in an undeveloped company without putting capital into that company. But the people who own capital don't want to put it in a country where the government might just decide to steal it, or anybody else. All the people might decide to steal it. You've got to have a stable moral. It's morality. People
yeah,
who believe you can steal stuff, that's not a good place to put your money if you're going to invest.
right. But the solution isn't when that bad thing happens is to go get another government to come and do some dirty work against the government you don't like so you can get your stuff back. That doesn't seem right.
The military solution to ignorance and immorality is it's a failure of the previous failure to evangelize and disciple these people and their governments. So the first thing we need to do is send missionaries to evangelize and discipleship and create a moral structure, a moral society, and then you can start building on that. You can't build, you can't invest capital in a country that believes in theft.
I've always, not always, for many years I have thought that it would be good for companies that really want to become like prosperous and do well in any nation to have almost like two jobs that their one job is to supply employment and a job for an employee and also encourage them somehow with incentives for educating them in free market economics so they'll understand uh, the benefit of what they're like of what they're getting to do there is a blessing and they're free to work and to make money. But if that person was to believe in like communism or socialism or some kind of like statist worldview, um, then that's not really that doesn't help the company for longevity if you have everyone in the country who doesn't believe the way you do about industry and production and that kind of thing. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah. In fact, I think that I've got this on a couple of Vine and Fig Tree websites that talk about first the requirements in Deuteronomy to be talking about God's law all day long, going in, coming out, lying up, raising up, all the time, talking about God's law, making that a central focus of your life. And it's in families, presumably in Deuteronomy, you had families who were doing business, family businesses. And while they're doing their business, while they're engaged in their productivity, while they're working 6 days a week, they're to be talking about the law. That is to say, they're supposed to be generating a cultural outlook which favors investment and productivity. And when you have all the people who are educated in God's law, that's when you have a climate that's attractive to the building up of capital, industry, and economic productivity. In the cigar factories of New York and Cuba, they often had education going on. They were all lined up in desks like in a schoolroom, and they were all rolling up their tobacco into cigars. But while they were doing that, there were people who were reading books and educating them. Now, unfortunately, most of these cigar companies were educating their workers in a socialist outlook. They were engaged in socialist propaganda. It would be much wiser for a capitalist business to inculcate capitalism or free market principles of industry and don't steal stuff and work and all those virtues, but the businesses need to be that needs to be a major part of business is creating a climate that's favorable to business. I mean, it seems so obvious,
Yeah.
but unfortunately, there's a lot of morality involved there. And we have this idea that businesses are supposed to be secular, which means not inculcating morality because morality always points to God. So they're not doing anything. And then outside of the work situation, the work environment, people are being educated by social media, by the mainstream media, and by a lot of propaganda that's not good morality. It's not
Right.
good morality.
Yeah, it'd be neat if the entrepreneur was like constantly like kind of reminding their workers that hey, we're doing something good here. We're producing a higher standard of living for everyone. You know, we're trying to, and that blesses people. And you're doing kingdom work, and you're doing kingdom building stuff, and just like inculcating them with real truth, reality, biblical ideas of blessings and I mean that's good stuff, right?
Right. And it would be beneficial for the whole country if businesses were educating people with a pro business, pro work, no theft, no violence mentality.
Amen. Hey, I got off tangent a little bit. I want to stick onto this Venezuela thing. I wanted to go back to Iraq because I feel like this is similar to Iraq because we kind of did a regime change with Saddam Hussein, who you mentioned, and then people would call him a dictator and everything. And yeah, I mean, to me, they're all dictators. They're all illegitimate dictators, every one of them. And until we can kind of get that realization in our heads, then that gives us like a better standard, so to speak, to judge all of these different actions about trying to overthrow this guy or this power play or that power play or this leader and that leader getting to rule and stuff. Like it's all just dumb. It's all just dumb politics and power. Uh, so
Right.
so 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 let me get to my question. My question is with Iraq, that ended up leading to, wasn't it like hundreds of thousands of deaths after the overthrow of Saddam Hussein and creating a huge faction and like civil war in Iraq and then leading to the death of like hundreds of thousands of Christians? Am I wrong?
No, that's true. It wasn't that I don't know if it was a result of the overthrow or if that was the mechanism or process or method of overthrowing. I mean, the overthrow of Saddam Hussein, it took a shock and awe, if you recall. White phosphorus bombed all over Baghdad, and the whole complete destruction of the Iraqi economy. And in the process of that military intervention, I believe it's the military intervention by the US that killed so many people and made so many people homeless and destroyed homes and businesses and was just terrible, terrible thing.
Well, okay, so
I'm not, I'm, that it's also true, I'm sure, but I don't know what the proportion is. It's also true that after Saddam was overthrown, we had the government taken over by a Muslim sect, and the whole country was put under Sharia law, and that resulted in the deaths or homelessness of more Christians. But I don't know who killed more Christians, the new Iraq Sharia law government or the military intervention. I don't know which was greater. I think it was the military intervention that killed more Christians. I
but it
think the
wasn't
U.S.
necessarily, but it wasn't necessarily under Hussein himself.
It was the U.S. bombing Iraq that killed so many Christians and made so many Christians homeless.
Okay,
I think the US killed more Christians in Iraq than the Sharia law people did. That's my impression. I could be wrong. I'm willing to be corrected on that. Either way, we wouldn't have had a Sharia government put in place if the United States had not overthrown the Baha'i government. And the Baha'i government is not a Muslim government. It was favorable to Christians. That's why Iraq had the largest population of Christians in the entire Arab world, because Saddam Hussein protected Christians against terrorists, against Muslim fanatics. So it was not a pro-Christian government, but it was a Christian neutral, Christian protective government. And the United States overthrew that and gave Iraq a government under Sharia law, which
it's
is
so
nuts.
insane. That's nuts. Okay, so people are saying, well, this military intervention was hardly a military intervention. It came with just a few bombs in Caracas, I think. There was no one killed, essentially, so it didn't have the same impact, let's say, as Iraq. Does that change much? Does that justify
I've
the
read,
action?
but I don't know. I've read something that said that Maduro struck a deal with the US before this happened. This wasn't a surprise. This was simply carrying out. It was the carrying out of a deal that Maduro made so that he
Okay.
could keep his family and not be destroyed entirely.
Yeah. Well, that
That's
was
what I've
probably
heard. I don't know if that's true. That's just something I read this morning, and I don't know. I don't really keep up with all this stuff. I don't claim to be some kind of foreign policy expert here. We should talk to Scott Horton or something and find out what's going on.
there's rumor that people are wanting to put in the America's wanting to put in a pro-Israel candidate, like this Maria Corina
Right.
Machado or whatever.
Yeah.
And so that this is just like get Maduro out, who's not favorable to Israel, for someone who's pro-Israel. Um, do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't know. I don't know that much about it.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's hard to
I
know.
agree with the direction of your question. I mean, I've heard some things about that, and that seems likely to me, but I
Mhm.
don't know. I don't have any details.
It certainly wouldn't be surprising. Okay, I've heard another thing about illegal immigration, that they were pouring in illegal immigrants, like criminals, into the country
Which
of
country?
Venezuela. Our country, that
Our
Venezuela,
country?
Maduro is pouring in a bunch of criminals into our country.
Oh, you're saying Maduro is sending illegal criminals into
I think
America?
that's one of the charges, like the kind of the allegations that I hear people saying about why this is good and okay, because he was putting in a bunch of illegal immigrants or something into our country.
Well, here's the difference between how an atheistic nation like the United States in 2026 handles criminals coming into the country versus how criminals coming into the country was handled by a Christian nation, say in 1750. In 1750, European countries regularly emptied out their prisons, put them all on boats, all the prisoners, and sent them off to America, to the New World. And they did that a lot. And you had a lot of immigration of criminals into the United States in 1750. But because this was a Christian nation, all the criminals were met at the docks by Christian social organizations and missionary groups who were there to teach skills, teach reading, teach Christian morals, get these people assimilated into an American way of life, again, through education, practical education, how to succeed in business, and of course, a moral foundation, a Christian and religious foundation, so that although, for example, the city of Salem, Massachusetts, the population doubled something like from 1700 to 1750, the population doubled, which is significant. But the quality or character of the city didn't change that much because there was a network of missionary and evangelistic agencies that were meeting the immigrants at the docks and making sure that they were parceled out to homes and put in places where they would become productive citizens. And nothing like that is going on now because we're an atheistic nation that doesn't believe in evangelism and discipleship. And so the criminals remain committed criminals. And because they're, quote, illegal, the criminals have to stay in the shadows. They have to stay in the ghettos. They have to stay in the underground. And there's no incentive for them to become better Christians. All the incentive is to become better criminals. But that's because our atheistic government does not believe in the same kind of evangelism and discipleship that the governments of colonial America, when it was a Christian nation, engaged in. So the fault is not Maduro's. The fault is our atheistic government.
Yeah, I mean, we're told to go and make disciples of all nations. What better scenario could there be than you not
And they're
even
coming
having to
here.
go out? They're coming to
Yeah,
you.
yeah, yeah.
Like,
And we complain about that, though. Not only do we not send missionaries, we only send the Marines after the missionaries haven't been sent. But when God sends the people here, we complain about that, even though that's an easier way for us to do our duty. So, yeah.
that's a sad reality. Okay, I have two more things I want to cover in this discussion with Venezuela, and then I'll let you go. Okay, the first one is people are talking about the Monroe Doctrine, that this is a Monroe Doctrine at play. That they even call it the Dunroe Doctrine, Donald Trump and Monroe combined. So the Monroe Doctrine, just for clarity, was saying that European powers should not interfere in American affairs and the Americans vice versa wouldn't interfere in European ones. And this is kind of like now this would be like Middle East and Asia, I guess, is what they would say. It's the same idea that we're doing this because Maduro is like having is maybe Russia and China and Iran you know become a bigger part of things, not like legally or illegally, but maybe through different policies or maybe through trade. Can you discuss this idea of him maybe violating this Monroe Doctrine idea?
Of Maduro violating the Monroe Doctrine or
Yeah, people
Trump?
are saying that Trump is like protecting the Monroe Doctrine by going after Maduro.
I mean, I don't get that. I haven't heard this. I don't know. You're pulling stuff on me that I'm not really prepared to talk about. But it seems to me that Trump is violating the Monroe Doctrine because what we're saying Monroe Doctrine was basically Europe shouldn't interfere in the Western Hemisphere.
Yeah.
But now Trump is doing what he was afraid that the Europeans would do. I mean, we didn't want Europeans coming into the Western Hemisphere and overthrowing democracies or overthrowing governments, but
Right.
Trump is doing that.
Yeah, you mean to all these Middle East, you mean to
To the European countries. Monroe says to the European countries, stay out of the Western Hemisphere.
right. And
Don't
you
do
mean
bad things. But now it's Trump that's doing the bad things. It's Trump that's violating the Monroe Doctrine.
right. And so for somehow for Trump to say that I'm protecting the Monroe Doctrine or for America to somehow appeal to that is the most hypocritical thing you could say when we're over in these other nations regime changing like crazy. We're totally involved in interfering with all of these countries. We have, military bases everywhere. And we're going to say, oh, they're violating the Monroe Doctrine down in South America. Like that just doesn't make sense.
No, I mean, and the U.S. is spearheading an attack on Russia using European countries in NATO. That's totally anti-Monroe. So
Yeah.
it's total hypocrisy. Total
Yeah.
hypocrisy.
Okay, last question. This has to do with the drug war and all of that. So this is he apparently Maduro was indicted, so it's just like alleged that he was involved in this conspiracy, drug trafficking and all of that with cocaine. I think cocaine. Cocaine is the big well, I read that most of the cocaine is produced in Colombia and maybe transferred through Venezuela. But anyway, I guess maybe Maduro's been involved with that or his cronies. And so that's this allegation from America that he's been indicted for drug trafficking and corruption. And so, I mean, what could the U.S. is there? My first thought is the U.S. needs to get rid of this whole drug war thing and stop making cocaine this bad thing because then it produces all this corruption that doesn't need to be there, but now it's created because now you've made it illegal, just like in prohibition. And that was a total failure in America that we had to end up just canceling the whole thing, right? It produced all these problems. And we do that with all this drug war with cocaine, with all of it really, heroin. And so my thought is to just the best solution would be to just make that legal in America, like all of it, all these drugs that were that would help things immensely. But I guess could you just speak to the drug thing? A lot of people are saying because of the drugs. That's the big talking point is that we're going after Maduro because of he's hurting our people with drugs.
Well, that's just drug war on steroids. I mean, it's the war on drugs. I mean, that's what I don't understand your question. It seems obvious to me. This is the war on drugs. It's just accelerated from local police officials to the highest level of the country. But we're taking down a drug lord ostensibly in the name of our continued war on drugs. If if the drugs were legal, number one, if we didn't have laws that made a black market in drugs and therefore made it more profitable to sell drugs, that would cut down a lot of the problem with drugs. Then people could get help because they knew they wouldn't be sent off to prison for a lifetime in the possession of drugs. And if they wanted to get off out of an addiction, they could get help. But also, we have to go back to the morality beforehand. Again, we didn't send the missionaries, so now we send the Marines. Why is it that there is such a demand among so many Americans to escape life instead of having a joy of exercising dominion, providing for your family, doing the good things that we're supposed to be doing as human beings? They're afraid of that. They want to escape that. They don't like that. And so they turn to drugs and they turn to uselessness rather than productivity. Where is that? That's a spiritual crisis of immense proportions. Nobody wants to talk about why is Americans want to buy drugs so bad. That's a spiritual crisis. Nobody addresses that. And then we make it profitable for people to keep people on drugs, for smugglers and dealers to keep people addicted because it's so profitable, because the government makes it all illegal and creates a black market. So we've got the government does not address the spiritual problem, and then the government profits off the spiritual problem. So it's like insane.
Well, and I've also heard that to add to all this, that the CIA has been involved in drug trafficking, essentially the government, our government, involved in trafficking drugs in South America, um, cocaine specifically, too. And so it's like, how are we going to somehow lecture other countries and I guess like go after other countries in the name of the war on drugs if we ourselves are committing drug trafficking ourselves? Like we're the ones who are committing the crimes, really. So isn't that just hypocrisy?
Oh yeah, I mean that hypocrisy is the government's middle name. In Los Angeles, you have gangs like the Crips and the Bloods, or at least we did 20 years ago. I don't know if they're still around. I don't know what's going on. But you have drug peddling agencies, enterprises at war with each other. This is the case of the United States, one of the world's largest drug dealers, at war with a rival drug dealing enterprise. That's basically what's going on here. They want to capture the Venezuelan turf. They want to eliminate a rival drug dealer. So I don't know. What a mess.
Yeah, what a total mess. All right, well that's mostly it. Do you have any last thoughts on then what is the solution? What should Americans should this be our foreign policy towards Venezuela? Should we be doing this action to this leader of Venezuela, whether he's good or bad? I mean, what is the right thing to be doing as American policy?
Well, yeah, when you say what should we do, you mean what should Trump do? And I would say Trump and everybody in the Washington, D.C. should abdicate, resign, and get honest jobs in the private sector. There shouldn't be such thing as a national foreign policy. That's just an invitation to corruption and disaster.
Yeah.
What needs to happen is Americans individually need to embrace the vine and fig tree worldview, the Christian religion, really. That's the solution to the drug problem because people don't have faith. They can't even face the realities of life without escaping into drugs. That's a big problem. But then you also have the problem of so many Americans believe that military might, destruction, violence is a solution to the fact that we're not carrying out the Great Commission, evangelizing and discipling people and making them healthy and productive and moral and virtuous. So I mean, the foreign policy discussion is very secondary to the whole discussion about the religion and morality aspect of it. That's where the fundamental problem lies.
Yeah, and that's why we're here to show and to talk to people, to educate them, Christian and non-Christians alike, that the Bible is the Word of God, and unless we follow it, we're in big trouble. Sin brings chaos and makes you crazy. And that's what we see a lot of these days. And we really need to see a whole national repentance, so we can and fulfill this vine and fig tree worldview. And yeah, just glad to that we can get this information out, Kevin. And yeah, we'll keep talking. We'll keep talking about issues as they arise, and just inform the people.
A modern way to look at Micah's vision of swords into plowshares is to say we should beat our foreign policy into a domestic policy of evangelism and discipleship. We need to get rid of foreign policy because that's basically the instrument of the sword on an international scale.
And turning the sword is also right. Plowshares is a symbol of production,
Right. Yep. Yep.
getting
Working,
people
exercising dominion, the dominion mandate, Genesis 1. That's what plowshares is. In other
is
words, we need to
yes.
beat the public sector into the private sector. We need to abolish the public sector and put all of our chips on the private sector, which is animated by the morality of Micah 4, the vine and fig tree world, the Bible. I mean, Micah 4 is about the people obeying God's commandments and walking on his paths. That's what the solution to all our problems is: walk in his paths, do what he says.
Yep. Amen. All right. Be sure to like and subscribe. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.
Thank
Thanks.
you, Dan.
Yep.